Once again, you're most welcome to the Youth Roundtable Show 2025 series. With me, Masawi Ivan, as your host. Today we discuss issues of Pan-Africanism. Before we go to the topic, I'll introduce to our guest, that is a lady and gentleman. I will begin from my extreme left, where we have Mr. Okware Jorem. Mr. Okware Jorem is from Uganda Christian University, Mukono. He is also an internee with Center for Constitutional Governance. You are most welcome.
Thank you, Ivan.
Wow. As you move to my right from Mr. Jorem is my brother. He has been with us on the show on many occasions, and we always appreciate him always reaching us and responding to our invitation. He's a youth activist and advocate and aspiring leader in the national resistance movement for his district, a district that he has mentioned on many occasions on this show. We do want to welcome our brother, Honorable Omia Abraham. You are most welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Wow. Our guest to the show today, the big lady on our show is Madame Nadongo Mary. Madame Nadongo Mary is coming to speak to us about the African Liberation Day in particular. She's the president for the Young Leaders Mobilization Commission, Pan-African Federalist Movement, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Wow, there were many words in a short digestion, so I hope I've not messed up.
No, it's fine.
So, closest to my left is a gentleman, very interesting gentleman, an activist for the Pan-African world, specifically Africa. That is Mr. Gabriel Rwothmio, a name that I love so much. You are most welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure having you. So, direct to the topic. On the 25th of May 2025, Uganda and all the 55 African countries will be celebrating 62 years of the African Liberation Day. That took shape on the 25th May 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And our topic today is a new era of Pan-Africanism, honesty and humility in the next general election. At that point is where I want to invite you, Mary, to give us a brief. What is the African Liberation Day about? What is the theme of this year's African Liberation Day? And all other details you may share with the young people on the Youth Roundtable who want to know more about the African Liberation Day.
Thank you so much, moderator. Once again, our viewers, my name is Nadongo Mary Blessing from the Pan-African Federalist Movement, where I serve as the president for the Young Leaders Mobilization
So
Commission.
we refer to you as High Excellence for purposes of this show.
And not really. It's just for positions.
The title president is
an
very big.
explanation of your responsibility, not really necessarily for the posing around and all that. So I prefer to just be called Mary Blessing. You don't have to say Her Excellence. But I preside over the Young Leaders Mobilization Commission. Yes. So, like the moderator said, we are celebrating the 62nd Africa Liberation Day. And in Uganda, we normally host it at Kololo ceremonial grounds. This is organized by the Pan-African Movement in conjunction with all other Pan-African Unionist organizations, because they came together under a coalition called the Pan-African Federalist Movement, under which I serve. It's a coalition of all African Unionists, all Pan-African organizations that still want to push the dream of our forefathers that fought for African unity forward, and not just moving it forward, but making it a reality. One day, Africa must unite. The history of this day dates back in 1963 at Addis Ababa, when 32 independent states of Africa, those that had gained independence, sat down to agree that there is need for unity. And that is where Emperor Haile Selassie was like, Africa must unite or perish. And all the countries that had gained independence that time were really in agreement and more willing now to move in solidarity, push forward the fight for their freedom, sovereignty, and gaining back their dignity as African, now independent states. So they came together to form the Organization of the African Union. It was done on that day, 25th May 1963. And so in 2025, it will be that 62 years from then when they agreed. It's the day they formed the OAU, and therefore it shall always be celebrated as the day they came together to agree to move together as Africans, not just the independent states that they had become, but rather to work together toward the collective transformation of their continent moving forward after independence. How do we move to liberate ourselves? A lot had been done, of course, in the years back, like we know the history of Africans that were taken as slaves to the Western world. And many of our brothers in the diaspora led movements to fight for their freedom. What now developed into the ideology of Pan-Africanism. It was the resistance that our brothers and sisters were pushing against what they were, the colonization and the slavery that they were undergoing in the Western world. So all these fights to liberate themselves is what now developed into what we call the ideology of Pan-Africanism. And up to date, many of us as Pan-Africans continue to remember their contribution. And on this day, we come together because there is still a lot for us to do to transform our continent. It goes beyond us gaining independence and the absence of our colonialists. Them leaving us politically free doesn't mean that we are really totally liberated, and doesn't mean that we gain back our sovereignty fully and our dignity. Today we are facing something we call neocolonialism, where the colonial master is not your political leader. However, he is controlling your resources and everything about you. And how do we move from this to being totally free? Enjoying our resources ourselves and building our continent, gaining back the superiority we need as Africans over our continent. And of course the other parts that we conquered, because as some went as slaves, but they ended up conquering some parts in the diaspora, which we now also consider as African states. Talk of South America, a lot of it is dominated by Africans. Talk of places like Jamaica, Haiti. These are purely African states. And that is why in the Pan-African Federalist movement, we believe that we need a federal government called the United African States. This brings, it's a voice for all African masses, both on the continent and in the diaspora, because they've already dominated some of those areas and we cannot leave them out. Some of them are Africans by the blood. Some, of course, those in the diaspora are not of the soil, because some are born and raised in the diaspora. However, they are Africans of the blood. By this I mean both their parents are Africans, purely Africans. They were moved from Africa as slaves to maybe the United States or any country, and they served there and lived there all their lives. But right now is the time for them to be repatriated back to their homeland, and this can only happen when we on the continent also come together to celebrate such days and remember that we need to get our brothers and sisters back on the continent. All the expertise they have gained, all the resources they have gained from wherever they had gone, we can still have them come and put them to use here at home. And so we can all build our continent and grow together. So this day, we come together to continue celebrating our different cultural diversities, because we believe in unity in diversity. And then we also remind ourselves that the fight is still on to liberate, especially economically. We need our resources to be meaningful.
I will come to that, because we are not going to summarize the fight in a few minutes. The fight is still longer than I expected. Abraham, I'll come to you. One Jamaican philosopher, that is Marcus Garvey, does state it in his words that people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. 1884 to 1885. I know you're not a history student, just like I was, but I was the best history student in my O level. It clearly states that there was a Berlin conference where there was scramble and partition for these African countries distributed within colonial masters. We saw a lot of people benefit. That is why the people, when I say people, the colonizers benefit states. I think the biggest beneficiary was King Leopold of Belgium, who benefited a very rich Congo and amputated people's arms and feet for exchange for labor. One thing I want to pick from you is the word liberation as we go deep. As we come to celebrate the African Liberation Day 2025, 62 years later, we started two member states in 1963, signatory governments. It was disbanded in 2002 under the leadership of Thabo Mbeki due to the site declaration in Libya that established the African Union, which came into action in 2002 as well. So, looking at all that history, where is African liberation journey? Is it on the right course? Is it stuck somewhere? Or do we still have some homework to do? Over to you.
Thank you very much, my brother Masawi Ivan. As you had clearly stated my preamble, those are my initials. And my accolades, perhaps I do go with them. Back to your question, from a very candid point of view, we can all acknowledge and agree that the forefathers, those who were at the front line of this very particular movement, few to say the Marcus Garvey, the African nationalists of Jamaica origin, the likes of Kwame Nkrumah Sajefo, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, wherever they are right now, they must be extremely disappointed because I do not think at any one particular point they do concur and agree with the shape with which African leaders are taking right now. So we have the current African leaders right now live along the motive of forming this very particular movement, ensuring that all Africans, irrespective of where they have gone to, those within and those in the diaspora, we have a common origin and interest. So we must be united by all means. A particular ideology that I always love to listen to so much from Pierre Lumumba, one of the best champion, the oracle perhaps Africa has ever had. The ancestors who were at the front line of this fight of Pan-Africanism in Africa, they must be extremely disappointed with the route that the African leaders currently are undertaking. With regards to the forthcoming celebration, you can agree with me. African leaders, both old and young, and those in whichever capacity, we have normalized a scenario that, for instance, if there is a very pertinent issue that we must address, for instance, this particular celebration is meant to mark a reflection where possibly we could have gone wrong. What should we really do to ensure that we stay on course? But as our norm has always stood, we shall ensure it's a public gathering. Everyone will turn up with a very beautiful script, well written, to read, speak English to the very best of it all, and that, we're commemorating this very particular day, but without giving, a moment, without giving a particular time to make a reflection and acknowledge that we, as the merchants of hope who are steering this very particular movement, we have gone wrong here. Let's get back to the drawing board and let's take this road. That will never happen, but we shall of course go with the norm. We speak good English. The day ends, we be like, we spew it on our social media platforms that, we commemorated the day. All this went on well, irrespective of the challenges, the primary challenges that African natives, both within Africa and in diaspora, they're still grappling with, that we were meant to address. You realize 62 years down the road, the progress that we have made perhaps in the latter years, to say, let me say 40 years after the four founders came at the forefront, there is a very big difference. The speed and the trajectory with which those people were taking is different with which those that we're having right now in the different dockets of leadership in the African countries are undertaking.
Wow. My brother Gabriel,
Yes, please.
you have listened to the father of Isaac, that is Abraham.
The one and only.
Yeah. As we gather young people
Yeah.
in Kololo Independence Ground to honor the call to ignite commitment, unity, identity, and self-determination,
Yes.
basically it will not only be music and food, but the theme for the, as she stated, is a call for accelerated collaborative approach towards cultural, political, and economic autonomy. Give your assessment and evaluation of that theme, but also from what the past,
Father Abraham.
you could take it from there.
Well, in what you've mentioned, thank you for asking, Ivan. In what you've mentioned, when you talk of collaboration, when it started, well, if I'm not mistaken, 32 countries?
32 signatory members, those were
Yeah.
states then.
States then. Right now, how many countries on the African continent?
We
Give
have
or take
55.
54? Yeah, 54, 55.
55.
If you look at the progress thus far,
We are
there's no
impressed by numbers.
yeah, the numbers are there, but the collaboration is lacking, which is why when Father Abraham was giving his point, I had to laugh, because when we talk of such a day, we are, say for example, we're going to celebrate, but what are we celebrating in essence? Yes, we have achieved, but we are backsliding. Countries now are so much more separated than they were before. You look at, in terms of, say, political, what's the English word? This is why the English, collabo. Political collabo, economic collabo, social collabo. People now are so much more divided than they were before.
Which they bring up a theme for a call of accelerated collaborative approach towards cultural, political, and economic autonomy. I think the theme is directed towards the challenges of.
Yes, but the thing is this, you're making a call, right? But these are things that have been happening. So is it going to be a call, how many years?
62 years.
People are born and die 62 years. They achieve something.
Yeah, in 62 years, someone may have died. It is a lot of time.
Yes. So imagine a whole continent, right? 62 years. And still a call. It gets to a point whereby we have to start asking ourselves, like, truly, what are we doing, or what must be done? Yeah, such a day obviously is significant. We celebrate African unity for what it is, or for what is left of it. We also acknowledge the achievements for those that were considered, for those that were accomplished, or for those that were intended. But when we talk about achievements, we often blindly just look at the positive. We don't want to learn from the negative. If I was a president, for example, there would be no reason to have a celebration, because we need to work to a point whereby we can say that, yes, we have done something. When you look at Burkina Faso, for example, and what they are doing on ground, and their, what's it called? It has a name, the trio.
The Confederation.
The Confederation, yes, of Burkina Faso, Mali, and
yes, between the Sahel states.
the Sahel states, yes. Or what was formerly colonially known as French Sudan. So when you look at what they are doing now, you don't see them doing celebration. They are putting in the work.
No, they don't want to celebrate.
That's the thing, is what is there to celebrate? To be honest, what is there to celebrate? Africa now is more divided than it was before. So we can lie to ourselves and a call for, quote unquote, a new theme each year, left, right, and center. But eventually we have to be honest with ourselves and decide to put in the work. The significance of this day should be a reminder that we have so much more to accomplish. We have so much more to correct where we went astray. Thank you.
Wow. You do pose a lot of key questions of the workload that Africa has to do in order to achieve this. I'll come to you, Jorem. Jorem, Center for Constitutional Governance, where you are, did celebrate the Day of Constitutionalism in this country, and one of its guests was PLO Lumumba. At that function, I was an invited guest. There was a big debate about our education, especially our own history and our direction as Africa. Today, Africa has 8 regional blocks. That is the North African, Arab Maghreb, East African Community, the West Africa, ECOWAS, and likes. These contribute to the world, to the entire African unity when we come under the African Union. But where do you think, going by Gabriel's submission, Africa is not doing enough towards unifying? Or because liberation was achieved 62 years ago, we shall believe it was achieved, is why we are celebrating it. But where are we not doing much towards our unity? Because we moved from an organization of African Union to an African Union, but we are still struggling with the same issues in regards to unity. Where you find Rwanda and Uganda can close a border to each other. You find in Sudan, 2 Sudanese are fighting. You find countries still fighting barbarically on internal conflicts that don't reflect national unity and national dialogue. You find generals who threaten Nairobi to be attacked in a weekend when they are satisfied. So where we are still grappling with those issues, where do you think Africa is not doing enough towards her own unity?
Okay, thank you so much, Ivan. First and foremost, I would want to defer, not entirely, but partially, to what Gabriel stated, that there is nothing to celebrate. I believe, looking at the origin of this whole Pan-African movement and the roots, why was there Pan-Africanism in the first place? You know, we're looking at things like slavery, colonialism, and all that. So, the mere fact that those things, yes, do not exist as much as they did back then today, I think the reason as to why we need to celebrate Liberation Day, and given the name of the day itself, Liberation Day, we are looking at the fact that we have obtained a certain degree of independence as African states. Yeah. However, looking at our shortcomings as African states, how we do not have unity individually as states and as a general, as you know, as Africa, I think our unity is lacking in regards to identification of the major issues. You know,
Unifying factors.
Yes, we are looking at
staying in power is what unites African leaders.
We are looking at national problems, you know, rather than continental problems. We are looking at the problem.
The scope.
Yes, we're looking. You know, an African leader will sit in power and be like, you know, this is my territory. This is what concerns me, and therefore, in his leadership, in his entire term of leadership, he's going to address only the problems in regards to, you know, the territorial boundary that you know he leads. We are missing out on the major rationale for the whole Pan-African movement, to unite Africa, to come up with a force that, you know, is aimed at flashing out these problems that we have. Because if you look at our problems, different states have different problems. But if you look at it generally, we actually have similar problems that if we came together as one Africa, it would be easier for us to flash out these problems. So the Liberation Day is not only celebrating, but it's also reminding us of the mere fact that there are certain things that we should be celebrating after 65 years, after 62 years, that we are not yet celebrating because of the lack of the unity that, you know, the Pan-African movement should have created in Africa.
Pan-African movement as an organization is united. It is the leaders of the different African states that let them down.
Yes, okay, that's very true, and we would rather have actually the leaders united, because that's the main cause of the problem. Then we are looking at yes, people, we may be united as, you know, the movement is united and so on, but what are the leaders, the heads of states, what are they doing? I think we'd rather have the heads of state agree more than just the movement, because the movement will just remain a movement without any goals achieved if the heads of states do not respond to these movements. And it's very funny that most of these heads of state come up with, incorporate these Pan-African ideologies in their manifestos, ideologies, and so on. However,
10-point program, 4-point program.
Exactly. However, implementation of these ideologies becomes very hard. Someone reaches someone is at that level of, let me say, presidency or the head of state, but your selfishness takes over. You forget about the reasons you gave as to why you're standing for power, the reasons as to why you gave, the reasons as to why people should have trusted you with power. Then when you're put in place, we forget all this. So this day reminds us of these particular things that we have left out, these particular things that we are not yet celebrating. We should not only look at the liberation, we should also look at the gaps. What have we missed out on? What are we lacking on?
Wow.
If I may.
You may.
Because when opening remark about liberation, celebrating it, it made me think of an analogy, and it's animal analogy. If you have a farm, depending on how you raise the animals,
take it pigs.
Not pigs. Pigs are often confined to a space. So say if you have chicken or like a goat, actually a goat. I'll use a goat as an example. If you have a goat tied to a pole, right? And you have
zero grazing.
Basically zero grazing, and it's a short rope or chain, whatever you tend to use. If you decide to just loosen up the chain, expand the chain, the goat will think it's free because it has more area to roam, but it's still chained.
Tied.
Now another animal is the chicken. Chicken loiter around, isn't it? Right? They go wherever they're going to go, but they're going to come back to the same place where they'll lose their lives. So with that as an analogy, is it really freedom if we are still...
No, we are tied, but the rope has been loosened.
It has just been loosened, because
so
if you...
that is still some bit of... You can now graze a little further than where you're grazing.
But
if
come
you
back.
Are grazing on food here was you can now eat fresh grass. Mary, as we go to the break, you will first take us through our last question for this particular segment. I'm very passionate about Pan-Africans, and I need to appreciate the work you're doing at the movement. Particularly, Kwame Nkrumah is one interesting person I also love so much. He has a statement: the passive sympathy of the African masses must be converted into active participation in the struggle for total emancipation of Africa. That was one of his statements while in England at the launch of the Pan-African movement. Today, Africa prides in 1.54 billion people. That includes Masawi, Ivan, and all of you, the panelists, if I'm not mistaken, you're of African origin. Today, Africans' challenges still remain youth unemployment, poverty, hunger, poor infrastructure, lack of accessible, affordable healthcare, lack of access to quality education, and the biggest one, governance, where you see a lot of wars in the West, a lot of wars in the Sudanese countries. As we look to this year's theme, where do you think all these issues that are pressing Africa as people in the movement, as people fighting for the one Mother Africa, and seeing that a country that was so rich, the second biggest continent on planet Earth, the fastest growing in terms of population on planet Earth, the most beautiful and the richest continent on planet Earth, is to align with some of these challenges in the theme, to see that they are addressed in these celebrations. Over to you as we go to the break.
Thank you so much, Brother Ivan. Now, that is where we come in as the Pan-African Federalist movement. A lot of my brothers have raised a lot of issues, actually. And for me, I believe, and all the other Federalists, that all these issues cannot be addressed until we politically unite. One thing we are sure about is that Africans want unity. That is why there are very many Pan-African organizations. However, the methods are different. We respect and commend all the other methods that everyone else is trying to put on table. However, we believe that political unification is the only way the African masses can give our leaders the power and authority to turn some of these things around. Let me give you an example. The African Union currently thinks that the continent coming together economically is the fastest way to unity. And that is why they proposed the AfCFTA, the
African Free Continental Trade
Area. We tend to, the mediocrity of us as
we shall
Africans.
reach there. We shall have a discussion in our next segment.
And that is what I think Nkrumah was talking about. We need to actively, Pan-Africanism is a revolution. You can't massage
one
mediocrity.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, beating around the bush and thinking that a free trade area will unite Africa is a lie. Because even if we have our borders open to the economy to trade freely, still, if we still have nobody that authorizes that to happen, then we are lying to ourselves. In Uganda, if you want anything to happen, you have to go through the state, the government, and all that. Now, in Africa, where do people run to? And that is the question we are having today. The existence of the African Union, but absence of African unity has become our issue. And that is why, to answer some of my brothers here, this is not merely a celebration. We call it a celebration, maybe for lack of a better word, because we Africans tend to understand the word celebration, but it is a call to action. It is a call to action, and we only look at having you in one place and giving you these ideas, hoping that you too will join us in signing a referendum maybe, or a petition to endorse a political entity that is a federal state for Africa, which is it would be the United African States. Like we know, OAU was changed to African Union because of some interest, because it was a result of the security matters on the continent. Countries were coming together in a body, however, they were not allowed to interfere when it comes to security matters in your neighboring country. Like some of these policies have to be put in place and reviewed. And so in reviewing such to allow some bit of collaboration in especially peace and security, it was now changed to African Union to also include some of other policies that were better for African unification.
We are going to go for a short break. As we return, we shall start over from you before we kick to Abraham and the other panelists on the issues of where you have already opened the trade barriers, because most of these regional blocks like the East African community, you will find that people have the needs and financial demands and challenges of the day have made trade a more significant objective towards than even the politics. Yet politics is what moves all these institutions. To our viewers, you can like Civic Space on YouTube, Civic Space on X. Leave us your feedback. Let's come back after a short break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We do welcome you from that short break. Mary, as we left for the break, I want to stick to you. You are making some submissions in regards to effective engagement of all the African people, but also the objectives and the aims of the African Union itself.
All right, thank you so much, Brother Ivan. Welcome back again, our viewers. Now, as speaking to the question of how best can we unite Africa, because it's the only way we can address the issues that you raised, the poverty, the health matters, the economy, and all that.
Hunger.
Without a political body that speaks for us with one voice, and I repeat, without a body authorized by the masses of Africa to speak for us with one voice, without that body, all these cannot be addressed from a collective point as Africa. Of course, states can try in their countries. Of course, they have their policies, they have their programs, and they're addressing some of these issues at that level, at national level. However, we still see our people suffering. And yet, if we united, an idea from Nigeria, an idea from Ghana, an idea from Kenya, an idea from Tanzania, if we sat in one room, then some would be addressed better. For instance, if our people here are dying of malaria, but there is another African country where malaria is not the biggest issue, honestly, if they put their heads together, I would think that a better solution would come up. But our selfishness and clinging onto the nationalism and really clinging onto our countries and wanting to do things alone is what is breaking us. Now, for the Western world, when they wanted to better their economies and perform better and become superpowers, they formed their federal states. The USA that you see today was a fragment of different states. But one time they had to sit down in the early, I think, 1970s. 17 something, you know, they sat together and started analyzing these issues, and I'm like, but are people of one blood? Are people from the same origin? Are people that are going to stay together for years and generations? Why don't we, one, speak with one language? Two, have a government, a central government to speak for us. But with that, the states can also have some sovereignty to run some of their issues. And it worked for them. Later, with all scrutinies that came following, they had to form their United African States. And we can all see the fruits, to the extent that America became the world superpower. Now, of course, it's being challenged by many other upcoming. But I mean, why can't Africa do this? Why? If our brothers in the Sahel region have already come together in a confederation and things are moving, a young president like Traore is already doing amazing for his country. You want to tell me that he sucked a different kind of breast? It wasn't an African one? Was that breast different from a mother in Uganda, a mother in any other country in Africa? So I think that these delays are just caused by us ourselves, and I will not point fingers to anyone. We are all responsible. Because I mean, Pan-Africanism is a revolution. Why don't we stand up and say, even the heads of states we are blaming, why can't we, for instance, the young people, we are the majority. One thing I know about democracy is that it gives authority to the majority to decide. Now, if we are to check who is the majority currently, globally, they are the young people. So if you're going out there and voting for presidents that cannot see some of this issue in a broader sense and are only clinging to small, you know, groupings and way of handling things, then we are also to blame. How about I pose the question, isn't it time that now we stood up and said, fine, our forefathers played their role. They took a step and started the revolution. Honestly, it has had its benefits. That is why we were able to have some independence independence as countries. Then they also went ahead to come together, at least in a body called the African Union. It is more of today as an elite body, a body for the heads of state. They come together and agree on different things, and a few stakeholders they bring on board. However, we are not seeing it really being practical enough, like Nkrumah was complaining. I mean, we are not seeing the practicability of their discussions that they hold, of the policies they pass. You're talking about bettering the economy of Africans and having a free trade area, but you cannot endorse something as simple as us having a common currency. It has to take, like my brother here was saying, 62 years, and you're still celebrating or calling to action. An example, if we want a common currency for Africa, 62 years down the road, we are still begging for that. African Union promised that in 2020, by the end of 2020, there must be no wars. Why are we still seeing wars in Africa? Why? And so all these issues can only be addressed when we have a federal state for Africa, a United African States that brings together the endorsement from the masses. Let the masses have a referendum, agree to having a federal government, one that is authorized by the people to speak in terms of our shared commonalities. By this, I mean that matters of security and peace, we share. We're all suffering wars. We are all afraid of interference from other countries when we have issues in our countries. It brings me to the point of also foreign policy, brings me also to another point of the economy. These are shared commonalities that across the continent, youth, for instance, are unemployed. They are suffering that. When it comes to foreign policy, I think majority of the African countries are suffering the same, that we have superpowers that come and interfere in our what? In our issues. There is some small conflict in Congo, they quickly come and make it a big issue and they cause an ending war there. So all these, even the African Union itself cannot stop it. However, if one day if we rose up and said, we now need a federal state that will speak and the other powers listen. In the UN Security Council, we don't have a veto power as Africans. No single African country or as a continent has veto power. So, and therefore, it puts us at a risk as a continent. In the matters of security, if one day another World War III broke out, we are not at the table. They will discuss and agree on how to attack us, and we shall never know. Yet we are the richest in resources. They will I think they will produce the ammunition from our resources and destroy us totally once and for all.
Let me bring
and
Gabriel.
We'll never know.
Gabriel has been Gabriel.
Yes, please.
On the foot.
Actually, a very fun fact. A lot of the uranium that was used to bomb Japan by the United States was found in
the DRC.
Okay,
the 40th, I'll bring back to 6th day of March 1997 during the 40th independence anniversary of Ghana in Accra.
Yes.
Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, whom we cannot avoid for these discussions as members of the East African community discussing Pan-Africanism, made the statement that I reject the glorification of the nation state that we inherited from all the colonialism and the artificial nations we tried to forge. We are all Africans trying very hard to be Ghanaians or Tanzanians. Fortunately for Africa, we have not been completely successful. The outside world merely recognizes our Ghanaianness, Tanzanianness, Ugandanness. What the outside world recognizes about us is our Africanness. What is your view on now we have arrived at the now?
Yeah.
Where do we think we need to dissociate and associate going forward with the objective of seeing that we are only not liberated in terms of our roots and history, but of the liberation of the mind?
Yes. Well, I will pick on his quote and say that we're all Ugandans because a white man decided this place is Uganda. The borders are like this, the borders are like that. After that, he changes his mind, he moves the borders like that. Then the communities that are along the new area are in conflict. So you have to reach to a point whereby you lose the self for the benefit of the whole. Yeah, Kokazungu is nice. But anyway, you get to a point whereby, okay, as a Ugandan, I'm a Ugandan, but I'm only Ugandan.
Discussing Alur, but we are now here suffering.
I'm only Uganda because Churchill or whichever English person decided this is Uganda. But if I decide and wake up, I'm like, I'm an East African because I want to be an East African. The other Kenyan also wants to be an East African. The Tanzanian, the Rwandan, the Burundian, the Congolese, the South Sudanese, the Ethiopian, the Djibouti, give or take, Comoros, and all these other places. If we all decide like, we want to be East African, because there is strength in numbers, you know. So, like he says, you lose. It gets to a point whereby you have to lose the ego. There's a quote, I keep forgetting who said it, but someone stated that because I love my country, I must criticize my country. Because if I continuously praise my country, I lose myself in my country. I fail to see the failures of my country. We have to understand that what we call countries to the colonialists were business ventures. This is like a business. I'm Leopold, my business is Congo. So I put like a fence so that the English do not come, the French do not come. This is kind of a plot kange. This is my business. So for you, 100 years or 62 years later, you're like, oh, me, I'm Ugandan, I'm Ugandan.
Actually, after Berlin Conference, we are 140 years later.
So it'd be like, I'm Ugandan, I'm Ugandan. But where did the notion or the idea of this being
2025 will be 140 years of the Berlin Conference.
140 years of still carrying on someone's trademark.
We are still carrying the same cash.
So yes, it has to get to a point whereby we realize that we have to lose ourselves for the benefit of the whole. And I feel like that's something that very many people are not willing to do. I'll give you a very good example. We don't even need to look at it nationally. I mean, between nations. We can just look at it one country. How many people are willing to forego, say, their tribal identity for the benefit of the country? Like, oh, me, I'm no longer I'm Uganda, I'm Uganda. No, I'm no longer Lord, I'm a Ugandan. To say I push the country forward. I don't even think there's it. But there may be someone, but you know, the attachment to the self-identity is what will drag us. But yeah, thank you.
Ivan, just to supplement, if I may.
You may.
So, Gabriel has talked about the fact that we are Ugandan is because someone said we should be Ugandan. And I do believe this, yes. And in supplementing, I actually want to believe that there is an inherent identity in us as Africans that if I went out, for example, say to America, without any question, without even asking me where I'm from, it's obvious. You know, the person will know I'm from Africa. Yeah. So it doesn't matter whether I'm born here or I'm born outside. There is already that inherent identity that I have.
I think where he questions it, that the inferiority of the esteem, people feeling it is of lower esteem.
Yeah. So the skin pigment itself is enough to identify me as an African. So going out as a Ugandan, I do not portray the image of Ugandans. You know, when someone looks at me, they look at an African. So I think we need to have this in our minds as Africans, that it's only us that look at ourselves as Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. You know,
a badge.
Outside there, everyone is looking at us as Africans. You know, the problem that Kenya is facing will be looked at as an African problem. You know, when the UN is showing pictures, you know, of maybe Ugandan children suffering or something, they can put a Kenyan child, you know, as the image. We have seen videos where people are being asked about countries in Africa, and someone can only mention, for example, like said two, South Africa, Nigeria. But now, as a South African,
when you speak of Burundi, they say, does it exist?
Exactly. Now, if as a South African I moved out and someone recognized me as an African, it would take a lot of explaining to do that I'm actually from the, I put in quotes, the better side of Africa, you know? So all the sympathy that is attributed to Africa will still shift to such a person unless that person explains himself, you know? No, I'm not from Uganda, so I do not have such problems. I'm from South Africa. I have different kinds of problems. So I think it's also within us that since we have that inherent identity, we also ought to have that mind that we are.
Marcus Garvey clearly states it, that liberate the minds of men and ultimately you liberate the bodies of men.
Exactly.
He was a Jamaican, a dark-skinned guy like we are.
Exactly. So once we have this change of mindset in the way we see the thing, we don't look at it as, we are not limited to only our,
The
regional-
boundaries, we alienate the boundaries of color.
and look at it as, Africa as a whole. I remember in the previous competitions,
Because you'll bring a Masawi from Bududa and you get an Egyptian from Cairo, and we all, me and Muhammad Salah, we all represent Africa.
yeah, okay, now you see that it's easy to say, but then remember when there were football competitions, how Algerians claimed not to be Africans. It's funny because of the skin pigment and so on. So we are looking at Africa as, we are limiting it to certain kinds of things, boundaries, pigments, origin, just because Arabs were at the north and what doesn't make you,
There are even religion.
Yeah, religion. So we are limiting ourselves to these things and forgetting the bigger perspective of it.
Because
I'd like to also add into what you're saying, that the issue of nationality and identity is very big, and that's why it still brings us back to a political unification, an entity that speaks for us, because everything starts with indoctrination. Like you said, change the mind of someone, you have them. If you can control their mind, you have them. Indoctrination. And when the colonialists left, when they can't attack you directly, they can't influence you directly, they can't change your mind, they are now using the governments. Because these are simple things. For us to get one identity, it's a matter, these are just matters of the government to handle. National ID. Some of us always have questions.
You're going
Why
to my
would
last question of security.
Okay. Why would you still put for us such fields as your tribe, you're Pan-Africanist? And the ruling power, the ruling party, to which I subscribe, has Pan-Africanism as one of its what? Principles and basic ideologies it's pushing.
Mobilization from
so, and I'm like, why doesn't my president talk to these guys of internal affairs? Some fields must be dropped. That is how you contribute to us practically in Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is not us just having these celebrations.
It is where my next question is, and Abraham, you once steered the finance committee at Makerere. I know you are a scientist, I'm an engineer as well, but these are day-to-day affairs. If the African Continental Free Trade Area is opened, Africa is to open a 5 billion USDs in terms of revenue transaction. It is to put 1.5 billion people on open border policy. It is to solve the issues of currency. It is to solve the issues of one taxation, which is to solve the issues of clearance, delays, and also give access to more creativity, innovation, because of the versatility that China also experienced when it opened its borders. USA, that versatile environment, because there is now easy engagement, transaction of knowledge, transaction of practices, and more exposure. As I know time is not on our side. Where do you think as Africa, our aims that are well clearly at, we are even part there in 2018 in Kigali, there was even a ratification to this, right? But up to today, we see the journey we are taking to realize some of these issues, like Mary stated, have been held back by our political intention. We admire, but we don't have a clear intention. Our actions don't match our words. Address the issue of finance and trade. Young people love money, including me. We are broke. We need the money. Where do you think Africa should point at the money? We need the money.
Surely, it's a dream of every other person. Perhaps I was waiting for you to get back the microphone to me, so I was just listening. Well, we should acknowledge and appreciate the fact that it's extremely easy and simple to lead, preside, rule over someone who is extremely poor, grappling in abject poverty. The person will have no objection. You'll do whichever thing that you want to do. But as we look at the entirety of all this, when you talk about the Berlin Conference, many years back, I was also a good history student like you. It was a boardroom engagement that ensured that the landlords, every landlord was being guaranteed, you know, a territorial rental that they have to look after. So as time progressed on, using Julius Kamarege Nyerere as a case point in steering Pan-Africanism is someone whom I really love and I admire. I think very many African states still need to get back and learn of his script when he started with the My Nature form, ensuring that 125 clans in Tanzania, they all come to unite and speak one language. I think he was the only one who was extremely exceptional in that very particular manner.
He was cautious.
Not only cautious, but he is really an exception in all
Today,
this.
Tanzania has a very unconscious president. They are now fighting barbaric acts like
as we take a look,
prosecuted in court for political affiliation.
So as we take a look at all these, whereas we have very brilliant brains who sit in the boardroom and be like, for us to have that sovereign African state, we need this to be done in this very particular direction. We need this. They come with a very beautiful concept note. They're trying to catalyze and push forward, but the landlords are seated at the extreme end. They have ensured that within every rental, they have a chief tax collector who is the president of that country.
They are viewing the show where we are speaking
exactly. They've put all of us, the brilliant minds. They want to distort. They want to distort what they had scripted earlier along. They ensured they had their rentals.
They speak of money. I don't want landlords. We don't have rents.
I'm giving you an analogy, and I bring back to your point. So, as we're having people, who want to bring this economic liberty to the inches of each and every individual
because there's also an issue of the debt. Africa has a gold medal in debt.
Exactly. So it's what I'm aiming at. So as we are trying to create this economic liberty, the great landlords are seated at the back. They're trying to see, they're catalyzing, they want to liberate these people from poverty. What should we do? Let's stagnate the process. And they come in and do that whatever. So automatically you realize that we're having all these regional groupings, ECOWAS, IGAD, COMESA, and so forth. They come and they be like, we have free continental trade. We have to do this. We have to do this. But Waleku ground, Bilalamuko, you reach at the border. What was being discussed and being passed, it's extremely the irony that is occurring on the ground. Because still, those who realize that, this thing is going to catalyze economic liberty of Africans. We need to do this to curtail this. We need to do this and curtail this. To ensure that, all the Africans, whether you're a big dog or a small dog, you are being kept grappling in abject poverty, such that when a moment comes, you still look up to them that, these are superpower country. They have all the money. They have all this. That is why even when Uganda is now about to, have its budget session passed on, but still you realize that, we are going to borrow money. We are going to do this. That is the same circle that they have captured all these African countries, whereby amidst even the rich resources they have at their disposal, they can not still look at them that, if we have this, we can do this. They still look at, we have superpower entities that we need to wake up and still borrow something from them. We still do this. We still do this. So addressing economic liberty of the inches and even the states and so forth, and then the presidents would perhaps ensure that we have forcefully expelled all these landlords. They will not have any say because we shall be having everything at our disposal. So it's extremely tricky. It's extremely tricky to ensure that, the young people, money comes at the hand of the young people. Money comes at the hands of the young activists. That is why, still taking the latest case incident, the trial of the opposition leader in Tanzania, the activist, who perhaps is a subject to investigation. We do not know whether they are being fueled by the spirit of Pan-Africanism to go and stand for a comrade, because what the comrade is facing, it's perhaps what they would be facing here. Now, we have seen on the social media, quite a number of people are being like, these are the whites-funded personnels. They're bringing chaos. They're bringing hooliganism. They have their ill intention. Most especially, there has been a debunk by the Ugandans who, those anti-activism. They be like, these people were being funded to do this, to do this, to do this. We are not certain. Anyway, as per me, I'm not certain whether they're being fueled by the spirit of Pan-Africanism. But they're addressing the gist of the matter that we need to look at. An injustice or an inequality that is being practiced on a citizen of South Africa, on a citizen of Egypt, on a citizen of Tanzania is the same as the one that I would face here. Much as at the meantime, I have my liberty.
Jorem, I know time is not on our side, but we now need to discuss the independent Africa we need to see.
Can I supplement a little on his economy?
You are the president, so you can.
Thank you so much. Just to supplement on what Comrade Abraham has said, the issue of the economy and liberating the young people of Africa from poverty and all that, it's like you said, the landlords are the ones holding us back, because this is an issue of education system that we're having on the continent.
We could not paying rent.
You know,
There's no way. The big dog is in charge.
because
If
when
I
you-
can't have a saying, there's a map where landlord umlava mafia.
you know, so when you discuss with our brothers that have studied, let's say in those Western countries, they will tell you in the United States there is no such thing as this education system. You have a P1 up to P7 and all that, and yet at the end of the day after graduation, you still have over 78% of graduates lacking jobs. What is that? Why don't we get practical? Africans, we are told that the backbone
Actually,
of
I saw
our
it in
economy
Germany.
is
Most
agriculture.
people have
Who
less
told you that the
education.
backbone of your economy is agriculture, yet you're the wealthiest in minerals? And who brought that? We need to start investigating as the young generation to plan for our children also in the future. Where are we going? Africa has never been dependent on agriculture. That was just imposed on us by the colonialists who wanted to take our raw materials and in turn bring them back as products for us to buy. Otherwise, we have bigger things that they also take actually without even paying taxes. You know that Uganda, I don't know if all of you are informed, but Uganda's biggest export is gold. It's not agricultural products. So we need to rise up now, our economy. So when we demand for a better education system, these are the things we need to be debating as the young people of the continent. Why aren't we trained in exploitation of these minerals, rather than we are always told, you go to school and the books are well written and saying how agriculture, when it comes to
You
science,
can't refine
it's
gold
science
in
on the
Busia.
surface, not science in depth. Teach our children how to mine this gold for themselves. Add value to it.
Refine.
What should they do in marketing it? Why are we only marketing raw materials, more of agriculture? And then you go to gardens saying that you're busy, now you have something to do and you're still digging.
We
It's
still
not even
sell the
mechanized.
maize and buy flour.
You know?
In terms of time, Jorem, I want to pick your views and to. It is the youth roundtable. There are youthful views. As we are on the topic, where do you think Africa should embrace to see that her independence is reflected in the lives of a common African man, but also in the general definition of Africa? It is filled. Where do you think? I know there is Agenda 2063. I don't need to discuss it because it originates from all these troubles we are into. When you see the 7 aspirations they want to achieve, I have taken enough time in reading them in depth. I've discussed the majority of them on shows, and you really see they are still connected to the problem and not connected to the solution. Where do you think Africa should lay her aspirations to achieve an independent Africa, where us as the young full people, we can now begin to innovate and create new solutions for Africa?
So, thank you, Ivan. To begin with, we do recognize the fact that to a certain extent, Pan-Africanism obtained some of its goals, like flashing out colonialism, which is the major issue in regards to independence. Yeah. However, with this came new problems, like neocolonialism now, and neocolonialism is more deep-rooted than actually colonialism was. You realize we are being colonized in different sectors now: our education, our language, our culture, TikTok and everything. All these things are ruling us, and they're not ours. You get? So this is a certain kind of colonialism that we do not recognize, but we are embracing, and we're not looking at the negative side of this neocolonialism. Because the beneficiaries of all this are not us. The neocolonialism, it's not us.
Time is not so.
Yes. So what we need to address as Africans in regards to our independence is these issues of neocolonialism. We should look at problems like issues like our education system. I like the fact that we try to amend our education system with a new curriculum. However, it's still not satisfactory. Like you do not see a lot of
We don't study Uganda.
of Ugandan,
Ngero,
Ugandan.
Walifu, Ebisoko.
Yeah, you do not see a lot of Ugandan culture in it. You get. One thing we should appreciate about North Korea, yes, we are going to talk about the dictatorship and so on and how this man is treating these people. But these people have totally kicked out anything to do with neocolonialism and imposition of other states.
We take the issue of neocolonialism. Gabriel,
Yes, please.
your parting statements and where you think Africa should improve.
I feel like
Neocolonialism as well.
neocolonialism is a process. Obviously, it doesn't start out of nowhere. It doesn't end out of nowhere. It's a process, and I feel like as Africans, we need to come to the realization that whatever choice we make, whatever choice is made or was made, impacts our future. You can't decide where to go if you do not acknowledge where you are coming from.
History.
Yes. So as Africans, well, as African people generally, we have to come to the realization that we are living a lie for the most part. We're delulu, as the kids say. We're in a delusional state where we feel like we think that we are free.
We think we are relevant when we are not.
When
That's
we are
what
not.
Trump said.
So if Trump is telling you something, you know they say a dead clock is wrong is correct twice.
Yeah, it did.
So if the worst person is telling you something, then maybe, just maybe, stop and think like, okay, I need to work on myself. I need to be better on myself. I need to concentrate on myself. I'll pick on something that that they said that when you have activists going to another country and
These are activists who live in Africa. They have no houses. They go to US to get good houses for free and safe.
because even the colleagues in Tanzania, when they are arrested and you hear the claims by the government like, oh, these people are sponsored by
The white.
the whites. Who sponsors our budgets? Isn't it the same white people? So we as Africans need to come together. We need to realize that
We solve the issue of sponsorship.
leave alone sponsorship. We solve the issue of realizing that what is going on, what is truly going on, rather
Come
than
to
just
consciousness.
come to consciousness. Because if the government tells you, oh, these activists are sponsored by white people, and you're like, hey, some people want to destroy us, but there's the same white people who are doing what? Sponsoring your budget, and in return of sponsoring your budget, they are getting what they want. So
My brother Abraham, as a person who loves the health sector too much, we are now in a situation where Donald Trump has actually withheld certain aid, like you said, and we are a liberated continent, but we are the biggest beggars on planet Earth. Your parting statement.
Thank you very much. As we end this very conversation, perhaps as we here in a very furnished room where we're just trying to shape ideologies here and there.
No, it is well furnished with an AC.
Well, we really acknowledge. I would really think that to a greater extent, the majority of Africans have sacrificed the unity, identity, inheritance, and their capacity in the temple of the white man's superiority, where they have been idolized to worship. At whichever instance, Africans are never being left in that very particular independent state. I would really think all those who are at the front line, those holding the different federation, association organizations who are championing Pan-Africanism, at whichever capacity, they should get back to the drawing board and cross-check and review so that we can pick up the script from where the likes of Julius Kambarage Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah or Sadjefo had left from. I really see there is a big deviation if we want to, realize the dream that they had begun.
I thought we are going to pick from where General Museveni left you. Okay, coming to our African woman of the day, our president of the young people in the Pan-African movement, Uganda chapter. Your concluding statements, are you inviting us in Kololo as young people? Which channels should we tune us who don't have transport? Young people are broke. Yes? Yeah, you. Oh.
All right.
Over to you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Ivan, for having this very pertinent conversation today on Pan-Africanism. which I'm so proud of as an African. And I believe actually Africa is my country. Uganda is only a state under it where I live and I'm born. So as we conclude this conversation, I quote Malcolm X, whose 100th birthday we are celebrating today. By the way, we are commemorating the birthday of Malcolm X. If he was alive, he would be 100 years today. We are celebrating a century of him. And he was born on the 19th of May. So our brothers in the USA right now, today is 19th, ours is 20th, but we join you all wherever you're watching from to celebrate a century of Malcolm X, one of the greatest revolutionaries that Africa has ever had. And in one of his statements, he said, blacks or Africans, women or men, wherever they are, will never be respected until Africa is a global power. This call is a call to collective action, solidarity in liberating fully our continent, economically, politically, and socially. So until we are the superpower that other countries have had a chance to be and declare themselves, until we also reach that point where we can say Africa is now the global superpower, we are heading economically, socially, and politically, no one will respect us. This also brings me to an issue of our dignity. We must restore back our dignity. Each time you move out there and you're pretending to be Ugandan rather than African, you're only putting yourself down and telling these other imperialists and our colonizers that you're not proud of who you are and you only believe in divisionism. We need to start speaking with one voice. Let us come together. The Pan-Africanism of the 21st century requires that we push forward solidarity, but at the same time, embrace our resources and liberate our continent economically as a whole. I wish you great
25th May.
25th May. Yes, we are at Kololo ceremonial grounds starting at 9 to I think late evening, because the ceremony ends at 6, but there might be some entertainment after. Now, it's a call to action. It's not a mere celebration, and we are calling all of you to join us, especially as the young people. We normally organize and officially invite youth from universities and also other organizations. However, it's also an open invitation to any other that hasn't received our invitation. You can still come. Yes, there will be drinks, there will be food. We start with a march, a solidarity march for humanity and African unity at the Independence Monument around Sheraton. We will march. There will also be a ride. The GACs, the Great African Cyclist Safari, will be there with their bikes also riding for unity and humanity, while others march with the UPDF band. We will celebrate. So we go to Kololo not just to celebrate, but to hear the things we want to be put into action. And one of them is to request the Uganda government. Of course, this celebration is in Uganda, so we'll be directly requesting the Uganda government to endorse one Africa Liberation Day as a public holiday. It's useless for us to have all these other funny public holidays imposed on us by the imperialists, and we have no day when we celebrate the achievements we have as Africans and also remind ourselves of what still lies ahead
What
for
a
us
wise
to
submission.
do. Yes, and then finally, to also request that all Africans come together and endorse the formation of a United African States as a federal government that will speak, a central government that will speak for us in our shared commonalities, while still respecting the sovereignties of the different independent states.
Hope you have been listening, but not only watching. This is the Youth Roundtable. We do appreciate our panelists today on the topic of Pan-Africanism. We do appreciate Jorem, Honorable Abraham, the President, a very loving gentleman I've met here, Gabriel. We remain the Youth Roundtable. We want to appreciate our production team, Center for Constitutional Governance, Civic Space TV. Let's meet again next week, same time, same place. Thank you very much.